Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor, here for the bottom of the show, top of the last hour. Thank y'all for staying tuned. Make sure you tell a friend, tell a friend. It's still much more good info. Keep it up, and I'm just so delighted. Make me want to do a praise dance. We got Miss Max up in the booth. Miss Max in the building. Razor.
Good to be here. You do not know how long it's been because when I do the show remotely, I can't hear the theme song. I don't hear the IMHO theme song. So it has been over a year since I have actually heard that, and it was good to be in this space and just kind of rejuvenated by hearing all that.
It's a good look too.
Got me amped for the show.
Yeah, thank you, Razor. We're gonna keep getting bigger and better. Y'all know Seville Inclusive Media. Y'all go ahead and check out their website as well while you edit. Shouts out to Charlottesville Tomorrow, Vinegar Hill Magazine. And I think that is a perfect segue into our next and final guest. Last but definitely not least, none other than Miss Mary Grace. Mary, thank you for joining us. How are you this afternoon?
Oh, I'm grateful to be here, Charles. It's wonderful to meet all of you others. In my humble opinion, this is a great show, and y'all do such good presentations, analysis, and the music. Everything's great. I'm just so impressed.
Thank you. And I appreciate you. We definitely do. And before we get into the crux of why you're here today, I want to remind the listeners, for those who may think that you may be a new voice, a new face, it's been a few years, but you actually, and you can correct me if I get the terminology wrong, but you were a medic, you were a first aid responder, and we had you on talking about your experiences, back when our city was in the early stages of its healing process from August 12th. In 2017. So I definitely want to do a good wellness check on you once again. Like, how have you been following that, as far as leading into your work today? Like, how did that shape your work of today, being in Charlottesville on August 12th?
I think it was the 14th. Yes, it was a ridiculously unstructured day by the police and responders and stuff like that. I was appalled at how little training had gone into any kind of nonviolent conflict responses. It was awful. I had been trained as an EMT with Madison County Rescue Squad, so I used some of my. I was no longer certified. I'm no longer certified as an EMT, but I still have the skills. So I ended up. Yes, it was a surreal day, Charles. It was just a very strange day because I ended up helping some Klan and Nazi members who had been injured. And they were there in front of me, and I just ended up helping them. And it was, I'm a Christian, and the passage that says, "Love your enemies." I just have never so literally loved my enemies, and it was fascinating and hard. I think, in terms of how it's shaped who I am, I think it puts in perspective. Like, I had a lot of individual conversations with some of these white nationalists who were there. Who just seemed like such little boys, such broken men with terribly traumatic histories. And I've done some research since about child trauma. I focus on child trauma. That's my major interest, adverse childhood experiences, including racism as an adverse childhood experience. So to see how these men have been traumatized, and then how the narrative allows them to then blame people and take no responsibility for their own actions. It's crucial and important.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And Mary, that is how God works, because Max had a question that she didn't get to with our last guests, who are mental health workers, and for you to be sort of in the same realm, because her question is in regarding like our youth and our children, and helping them. I don't know what the exact question is, but I'm banking on she making ask you that question. But before we get to that, want to go ahead and introduce why we why we have you here today. So you are a board member of the UpperNile Orphans Care Organization, based out of South Sudan. And so go ahead and give sort of the stump speech to let our listeners know, what that work is about and why it's important to you.
Sure. So I volunteered as an English teacher in South Sudan in 2013 and 2015. And while I was there, I got involved in going to visit at the Doctors Without Borders Hospital and met both the director of the hospital, and I worked with a little amputee orphan guy, Khan, who's now 15. He was 5. And when I came back, the director of that hospital, he ended up starting this NGO in South Sudan, UpperNile Orphans Care Organization. And when he told me about it, I just said, oh, I want to help. So what we do, we started a 501c3 here in the United States. Some wonderful, skilled people helped start this 501c3. So it's a nonprofit educational charity, and we raise awareness and funds for that school effort to start, but we want to broaden it out so that it's more far ranging than just that one war orphan residential school.
Okay, thank. And you mentioned NGO. That's non-government organization, right?
That's correct, sir.
Yeah. For those that may not be aware. So, first question that I have for you in regards to that is, like, why South Sudan, right? Like, what was the connection, or what was the importance that drew you there and made you become part of this work?
Oh my goodness. So even when I was a little kid, I just always was taken. I had some really foundational experiences here in the United States as a little kid in terms of racism. Like, I remember when we got our first TV, and one of the first things I saw on the TV was Bull Connor's dogs attacking children in the Children's March in Birmingham. And I just started screaming, and I don't remember what my mom said, but it was something that helped me understand that it wasn't my fault, but I was responsible. And so my life has just unfolded in this way that I attend to and just try to observe what goes on racially in our community and in ourselves. So when I heard that my home church up in Northern Virginia, I'm a member of Charles Church too, but up in Northern Virginia, I a group of them were supporting a school effort in South Sudan. And because I had been teaching English for about 17 years to immigrant adults here, I just reached out and asked if they needed an English teacher for a summer. And I ended up going, just loving it. Of course, I learned far more than I taught. And so ended up being able to go back again and then help start the school.
Right. Now I'm going to go ahead and ask maybe one of the tougher questions. I know Razor probably think he coming up with a tough one, but this is real. And, Mary, like, definitely break down the makeup of this group, because one thing that I'm sure that's crossing people's mind, because this comes up when you talk about organizations that do such mission work, right, is sort of the great white savior complex.
Yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind, break that down when it comes to your work and how you personally respond to that, within doing this work.
That's a huge concern and consideration. The organization is predominantly Black and African American. And I, because I had gone there with a skill, so South Sudan became an independent country in 2012. And I went in 2013 because they had chosen English as their official language. National languages are all the tribal languages, about 64 or so different tribal languages. And so I had a skill that I could share for a specific time. And so I went. And that, I mean, I do a lot of work here in the States too, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, the fact that I'm white is a reality, but I think it's an interesting perception how we racialize people and individuals and systems, and the racism that is prevalent and predominant in our society is also a factor around the world because of colonialism and the legacy of and capitalism and the exploitation and extraction resources. I mean, it's something that I try to fight with on a systemic multi levels to oppose extraction resources and those kinds of things, which make for the need for other people to maybe learn English. It's all of a piece. And yet the more tools that people have wherever they are, the more likely they can then create their own space, their own ways of being without any reliance then on the great white savior.
Mm,
Those I am very cognizant of that. I actually asked other people to be the president of this organization so that
mm,
it wouldn't be a white person at the head. But
mm,
I just seem to have at the time, I just seem to have the passion and the
mm,
time to devote to trying to get this going. And I saw the need as desperate enough that I was willing to step in to fill that need. But other people in the group are now doing amazing things, like your dad, Reverend Frank D. Lewis, is the vice president of Uoco, and my wonderful minister. So, and he's doing incredible work reaching out to the community in Central Virginia to raise funds and awareness about these kids.
Did you go into this this opportunity with any expectations? And then what was the reality of that once you actually got immersed into the programming there?
That's a great question. I think one of my main expectations was that I was going to teach English, and
mm,
and and I knew that I would learn a lot because I had not been to Africa, and I knew that I would learn a lot, but I didn't realize how much I would learn and how little I would teach. So I think going to some place like that, it's more of a relationship building than a teaching experience. And I mean, I certainly made a difference in
mm,
terms of like relationships with some of the people I met. And actually, this organization sprung out of a relationship. He didn't think he would have been able to. Tito is the man's name. He's a Nuer man from that area, Lair County. He didn't think he would be able to do it without support specifically from the United States. And so, my being able to say yes to him allowed these kids to now have a place to call home, a place where there's caring staff, where they get food, which is a real huge issue, and increasingly so right now with the instability in Sudan.
Tell me something you've learned.
Oh, I've learned that I should keep my mouth shut most of the time, and that I should follow the lead of like the oldest woman in the Native community and really listen and watch and respect. And yeah, it's a humbling experience in that I just know that I don't know almost anything. And our goal as UpperNile Orphans Care here in the United States, Uoco USA, is to raise awareness, to raise funds, but also to give them what they need to make their school successful for their kids in their culture and
okay.
the way they like they're teaching. Where is the language the school is taught? They're teaching English, but because that's such a necessity in the society, but they're teaching, almost all the classes are taught in Nuer. They're learning Nuer culture, and it's their school for them, for those kids, and we're
Mm,
simply enabling them to do that.
mm. Yeah, and we have a comment from one of our viewers as well, and like what it leads to is sort of different than what I asked you before about um, like the whole appearance of being a white savior. But does any part of you feel like it's the best way to say this? Like, well, one of the terms that's used is white guilt, right? Of sort of because what the listener question was spinning the block. Is this spinning the block, which means going back to fix something that was messed up? Is there, like, do you feel like that most of it is because you are obviously a humanitarian, but when people use terms like white guilt is driving it, do you think that's a good or a bad thing, or either?
So I think this is a really profoundly important conversation,
Mm,
and a lot of a lot of white people work out of guilt. And it goes back for me to that conversation with my mom when I saw Bull Connor's dogs attacking kids. I and to reiterate, she said that it somehow helped me understand that it was not my fault, but that I was responsible. And I
Mm,
think that's a really fascinating balance. And I don't think most white
yeah.
people have heard that kind of analysis or clear boundary.
Mm,
And so I, uh, yeah, I don't really know how to deal with that. I probably do feel some guilt, but not in the way that I'm doing it because of guilt. I'm doing it
right.
because it needs to be done. And it's a work that I am gratefully uniquely qualified for in this particular venue. And so I'm just trying to do what I can to make that work happen because I see a value in it.
Thank you. Thank you. And Razor, I think you had a comment or question.
Yeah, first
There
I
you go.
want to say thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
But I also, it was two things that you and Charles said that kind of spawned this question. One, I like what you said about you were tested because you had to help your enemy, with the Nazis and everything, right? And then when Charles started talking about just spinning back, it led to this question. The majority of in my humble opinion, the majority of the things that white America tries to fix in black and brown communities are things that white America has implemented or in control of. So why wouldn't we take all the time and effort that we go to build the schools and put rice in bowls and water and build these things and lobby right at the people who are doing the stuff? So let's say, for instance, for what your mom taught you, instead of marching and intervening and keeping people from being bit by dogs, why wouldn't we just show up at Bull Connor's house?
Yes.
If because it's a lot easier for them to kill black and brown people than it is to kill somebody that looks like their sister and their mother. And I personally believe that's what really helped the civil rights. I know a lot of black people not gonna like that, but I think when it came down to them having to hurt somebody that looked like their daughter or their mom or their sister, that made them at least hold up a little bit. So I'm just wondering why, when we go do these works in other places, we don't just go right to the people. So if it's been colonized by England, we go straight to England and then get at their front doorsteps instead of going out there and, like, it's not putting a band-aid on the problem, but it's also just kind of trying to make it palatable, in my opinion, for something that we're not going to where the actual faucet is.
Those are great metaphors and analogies. And you're absolutely correct. It has to be a multi-pronged, systemic, as well as individualized approach. So Charles knows some of my history. I've been an activist since I was a young woman, and I've lived in multiracial communities and in immigrant communities. I mean, intentionally in the same houses and stuff. And I just had a family of refugees move out from my home, and it's so I think, yeah, and I am part of, like, I rage against the machine. I go to demonstrations. I've been arrested numerous times for nonviolent civil disobedience, and that's again a white privilege in that
Mm,
if I were a black man, I mean, I've been arrested with all different kinds of people, and the black men tend to be really heavily targeted for violence by the police
mm,
when they risk these kinds of situations. Not to mention, I mean, to mention, then it goes in the box when they're trying to apply for work. And I can, as this little white woman, I can say, oh, I've been arrested multiple times for nonviolent civil disobedience. And usually they just say, oh, okay. But if I were a black man, they would not say that. They would say, thanks anyways, go someplace else. And so I see my privilege, my race privilege, and I'm privileged by the mere fact of my pigmentation, my lack of pigmentation, um, that it puts then a responsibility on me to do whatever I can to address systemic racism and other kinds of violences in our society. And it's myriad. I mean, it's there's just so much to address. And I mean, I lobby, I show up at yeah, and we were just at the governor's mansion in North Carolina the other day. Yeah, all of it's wrong. And so uh, as I do this effort for some kids, really rooted in my relationship with other kids whom I met while I was there, and seeing kids with their eyes packed with flies, and just teaching those kids, okay, let's all go to the well, and we all go to the well and they wash their faces, and then the flies aren't landing on them anymore, and just those kinds of relationship building things that I was privileged to do helped me build a relationship in a way that I really wanted to then make a difference in the work that they want to do for their own community. It's not
Right.
me doing it. I don't tell them what to do in the school. I don't choose what the curricula is. That's not my right, my place. They are doing their own wonderful, amazing thing in that school. And it's only, they just have one big hut with 27 children and staff and supplies and food. It's all in one little tiny compound.
Yeah,
So
and Mary, that's what I wanted you to get to next too. Is because we have you here on the radio, right? So like wow, it's a good conversation, and like definitely getting to the crux, of a mission such as this, in particular this. But like, what's the ask directly? Because I don't think we really got to the core of that. Like right now, like what's at stake and like what's needed to continue this work.
So yes, we are. So we have this one little school. It's called Hand of Hope Community School. We hope, or they hope, their hope is to eventually grow larger and be able to start more schools and do women's education, because the illiteracy rate in South Sudan for rural women is 98%. And of course, women who can't read or illiterate in their own languages, they're not able to then teach their children, and the cycle of especially stuff against girls continues. And so anyway, we have a lot of goals as an organization for them to expand and do more schools and women's education and all kinds of literacy programs in the community. And to do that, but to do just our basic school that we have right now, which is in one small county in northern South Sudan, our baseline goal is $4,700 per quarter to raise, and almost all of that funding is coming from us. But a couple NGOs have gotten involved, non-governmental organizations there have gotten involved to help. One NGO built a set of latrines for the school. Another built the fence around the compound, which is really helpful and important in an area where there are dangerous animals and dangerous people. But our goal in terms of our funding, all we're doing right now is food and staffing. That's almost 100% of our funding now, and none of our staff here in the United States, none of us get any funds at all. We don't get any kind of income or anything, not even expenses. So our goal is to make that school happen and then grow it. What's impacting that is that there's 30 or more years of war in that region. Sudan Sudan and South Sudan had a civil war to separate, and that separation for independence happened in 2012. But then very soon after that, when I was there, actually, the first time, there was a schism in the government, and the president and vice president ended up dividing there from different tribes. And it's really the legacy again of corruption and colonialism that created these manufactured differences, which then created a new civil war in South Sudan. And that civil war somewhat subsided, but then in Eritrea and in Ethiopia and in Tigray, the Tigray region of Ethiopia, there's so much trauma going on up there that people are flooding into Sudan. And now there's a war in Sudan. And so people are flooding south. All these refugees that are coming from the east, from Tigray, Ethiopia, and Eritrea, they're flooding in west into Sudan. And because of the war in Sudan, now they're flooding back. And many of them are South Sudanese who fled north because of the civil war in South Sudan. So people are flooding south, and that is creating a huge destabilization in the communities, but also about, according to Oxfam, half of the people in South Sudan are now food insecure and in danger of starvation. And so the food routes to get food to the school, our kids are safe now. Tito, the director, believes that the kids are safe right now, but accessing food and getting food in there is hugely problematic and likely to get much worse before we can fix it.
Thank you. That's good info.
I had a question. It's one of those Max questions. And I imagine it's gonna rub some people the wrong way, but I'm making apologies for it. So again, thank you for joining us and listening to your story about your mission and what you are trying to accomplish there. You and your team are trying to accomplish there in Sudan. So I personally think that a lot of the issues that we as a society deal with in terms of race is because of the differences or lines we draw as far as people groups, right? And so I am wondering what parallels you have been able to see between the individuals that you may have helped on August 12th, and the individuals that you are working with in Sudan. And I ask that question out of pure curiosity only because I think that the only way that we as a society help one another to get on the same page and to be able to get past some of the divisions is to see the similarities between one another. And I think that race has a place, but I am by no means what I feel to be like a social justice advocate. I see human beings and I see what's right and what's wrong, and I see fairness. And I think that, again, the way that we overcome a lot of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of race in this world is to see the similarities. And so I'm just curious, what parallels you have been able to draw between the young man who was on the side of the Nazis, who was laying on who you were helping on the August 12th, who just wanted help from you, and you could tell had issues that started as a little boy, and the person that you're serving in Sudan.
Wow, profound questions. I think one of the parallels that I see, the main parallel I see, is child trauma. Kids who grow up in war have horrific negative outcomes, and kids who grow up in any kind of trauma have exponentially negative outcomes as adults, not just in terms of emotional health, but also in terms of physical health. And so when you look at adverse childhood experiences, that ACEs study from the mid 1990s that was done by Kaiser Permanente and the CDC, that their study showed diabetes, obesity, cancer, lung disease, heart disease. I forget what all else, but all of the typical traumas that we know happen with mental health concerns, but also all these incredible physical outcomes. And those physical outcomes and the mental outcomes for adults destabilize their ability to be parents or to be functional members of society in ways that help lift themselves and their families and their community up. And so I see some of that as a parallel, if that makes sense, that trauma it goes way past it's exponentially difficult for people of color to deal with these things because they don't tend to be lifted as easily or as safely by society. There are incredible discrepancies in who gets help and when they get help and who's dismissed, and so the ability of people to heal and to build resilience is impacted by all kinds of considerations.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
for
no
that.
right or wrong
Am I
answer.
answering that?
Yeah.
What's
For me,
Yeah, I think it was
you
good.
are. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and Mary, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention as well. You know, there's somebody, you know, hearing and thinking, you know, well, it's like we have a lot of young people that we have to help here and within our community, you know, which is fair. But you know, like I can appreciate that there's plenty work to go around, right? There's like the labor is plenty, the workers are few, right? Labor is plenty, the laborers are few. So, and I noticed what you said too of you know, it makes me think about our own community on how you're talking about, you know, like North Sudan, South Sudan, and how there's sort of like a migration back and forth. And at some point, some of the issues, you know, like the problem has to be bottlenecked and the issues have to be resolved, or, you know, as migration happens, like some of the same issues are, you know, are going to perpetuate, you know, as time goes on. So, you know, so I personally definitely applaud that, but I was curious on you know, on just your take of that of like the whole approach, sort of the wholeness of it when we think about, wow, like this sounds like great work, but you know, we as a people need to, and I say the people as like the human race need to understand that when I help my brother or my sister, that inherently is going to help, you know, others, because if they're better off, then they'll function in society better, right? So I kind of wanted your take on that, on the importance of realizing that there's work needed in so many places, and it all makes a difference.
absolutely, absolutely. It is all connected. There's an old feminist proverb. It's all connected. Everything is connected. It's like, so when I was planning to go to South Sudan the first time, I had a great experience. I would hang out with neighborhood kids. We'd hang out on the porch or do craft projects and stuff in my neighborhood. And when I was getting ready to go to South Sudan, I had like hundreds of pencils, and none of them were sharpened. And so I'm like, hey kids, want to sharpen pencils with me? So we sharpened, these neighborhood kids and I sharpened hundreds of pencils. And here's these little kids in my neighborhood doing something for kids across the world. And they loved that they were doing that. And they felt connected to those kids. And when I came back, I said, oh, they love the pencils, because the pencils there sucked. So it was that kind of, I think, like, I do a whole lot of stuff. I mean, I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just as way of explanation that everything is connected. I do a lot of stuff in my neighborhood. We're building up to something called Street Reach at my local church. I'm a member in a Black Baptist church where I try to not say a lot. And so we're doing this Street Reach thing where we'll have, like, I'm going to do a hula hoop making workshop, and we'll have a lot of free food, and all kinds of kids will come to and play and do all kinds of games and stuff like that, and build community. And I did a garden project with kids. I went around the neighborhood, and in place had a bike, or looked like there might be kids there. I invited the kids to come out during COVID and plant some seedlings and seeds in the garden, in their yard. Those kinds of things build relationships that cross the difficulties that they'll see in their lives. It helps build resilience. So I finally just got a degree, an undergrad degree, and it's an interdisciplinary degree, and you get to call it whatever you want. So I'm calling it trauma, resilience, and belonging. And in that, my goal is to make those connections, is to help people understand that it is in community with one another, past all of the superficials, past all of the labels. It's in community with one another that we build the strength and the accountability, as well as the love, to be able to proceed, to be able to make the world better for one another.
Thank you for that. So if Max didn't have anything else, I wanted you to make sure the folks know how to reach you and definitely like how they can get more involved, or if they want to learn more first. Like what message would you leave with the folks that may be their first time hearing about this organization?
Oh, thanks. So we are UpperNile Orphans Care Organization, and it's at Uoco. So uoco.org. You can find us on the web. And we just finished our bike-a-thon yesterday.
Okay.
Today was the rain date, but they were able to bike. And I'm COVID isolating because I had a big exposure on Wednesday. So I wasn't able to ride, but I'll ride again later this summer. So go to that website, uoco.org. And I'm at War Orphan Care Mary at gmail.com. The War Orphan Care Mary. And please contact us. Go to the website, see what you think. Look at the teams. In terms of diversity, I think I was very intentional on trying to reach out to friends who I just felt had integrity and passion for the same kinds of things. And those are the people who are on my board. So I'd welcome anybody who wants to do any kind of support work for this or for other kinds of stuff in the community. I'm always interested in hearing what people are doing in their own struggles and their own work.
Awesome.
And donations, we're especially looking for monthly recurring donations so that we can budget for the school more easily and not have to keep doing fundraisers all the time. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being serving other people. For as long as I've known you, you've always been about others, and so I definitely thank you for that. And continued blessings and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
And definitely any word, any communications that we can get out for this area in particular, don't hesitate to let us know.
Thanks, and your daddy will know too.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Charles. I love you. You are awesome. Thank you, everyone. What a beautiful work you're doing. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Keep on keeping on.
Thank you. We'll do. And IMHO family will be back to close. And so y'all stay tuned. In my humble opinion, IMHO talk show. Stay tuned, y'all.